Diamondvale, Shattered Memories. By Eric Hua. Chapter 19. The Shadow Courier. Sahil was counting his profits at the counter when Jacob suddenly marched in. The gatekeeper asked about the new tenant that replaced Myla's room. Sahil had only seen her once and he didn't know much about her. Jacob was doing an investigation of legal goods being traded among Nadir. He had a feeling Sahil's new tenant was a possible culprit. Because of his suspicion, Jacob asked if he could search the room. Sahil was initially against the idea as he didn't want to lose a good customer. However, Jacob told Sahil if the tenant was a thief that was holding contraband, Jacob would consider giving him a portion of the items as a reward. Immediately, Sahil told everyone in the dining hall that business would be closed for maintenance. Sahil used the master key to unlock the room and upon entering, they found no one home. Disappointed, Sahil was about to leave, but Jacob told him that they should search the room. They searched for a few minutes finding nothing of value, and to make matters worse, they heard the entrance of the room opening. In a panic, they tried to find a place to hide and they both ran into a room that was filled with tape. They were tangled within the trap and were unable to break free. Entering the room was a girl who wore glasses and stood no taller than 5 feet. She looked around and it was clear to her that someone had entered into her unit. Slowly, she made her way towards her room. Jacob and Sahil continued to be silent as they could hear footsteps closing in. The tenant was reaching for the door, but a loud ticking sound coming from the window caught her attention. A crow was pecking at the window and she allowed it inside. The feathered animal made some crow noises and when it finished, it flew out of the room. The girl followed after the crow, after grabbing a leather pouch on the table. After much struggle and a hint of teamwork, Jacob and Sahil untangled themselves from the room of tape. After falling on their behinds, Jacob told Sahil that they were going to follow the girl. Sahil was confused as the tenant did not leave behind any trails. However, Jacob understood what the crow was saying as being a gatekeeper, he learned to speak with crows. He led the way and Sahil followed behind. The girl made her way to the hidden underpass within Nadir. When she arrived, she found herself alone holding the contraband stashed away inside a coin pouch. It didn't take long before a gang of punk-looking guys showed up and scattered through the area. The girl stood her ground and showed the pouch to them. She threatened that she would drop the contraband down the sewers if they moved any closer. Her threats worked as they all stood still in their position. Then she heard the leader clapping his hands approaching her way, calling her the Shadow Courier. Hiding in the alleyway and spying on the conversation were Jacob and Sahil. When Sahil heard the title of his tenant, his expression changed, but Jacob was clueless. Sahil told Jacob that the Shadow Courier was a legend amongst merchants and business owners. This person was known for their incredible skill in smuggling illegal goods and trading them for an incredible return. The leader of the gang stood asking if the girl had the goods. The Shadow Courier held out the pouch and revealed the contents within. The kingpin reached out towards the crystals, but the girl pulled them away, wanting her payment first. He snapped his finger, and one of his lackeys returned with a briefcase. The instant the trade was complete, she was ready to flee the scene. However, one of the minions blocked her path. The boss grabbed one of the geode stones and held it with one hand and crushed it. But nothing happened. All his henchmen were confused until one of them took a geode stone and put it in his mouth. It was candy. The leader was furious as he gave a malicious stare to the notorious girl. The Shadow Courier waved nervously, hoping to calm him down, but he commanded his henchmen to capture the girl. Because of her tiny stature, the shifty rogue was extremely nimble. 2 henchmen from opposite sides attempted to grab her, but she ducked, causing the 2 men to collide against each other. Another goon appeared, hoping to catch her by surprise, but she cartwheeled out of the way and he ran into a wall. Then she appeared before another crony, who went for a bear hug, but she slid through between his legs. She was now running towards the exit, but one underling stood in her way. From underneath her sleeves, 2 strands of tape flew out and latched onto a higher surface. She pulled herself up and swung past the enemy who blocked her path. The Kingpin saw the Shadow Courier escaping, so he called for his remaining flunkies to follow him as he was not letting the pipsqueak make a mockery out of him. He and 2 of his followers managed to make it through, but blocking the rest off was Jacob. The Gatekeeper of Nadir took out a couple of henchmen easily, which caught the attention of the rest. Despite being outnumbered 6-1, Jacob was ready to fight with his spear in hand. Sahil appeared as well, and he told Jacob to go after the Shadow Courier and leave everything here to him. The Gatekeeper thanked Sahil and he left to pursue his targets, leaving the lonely innkeeper to deal with the remaining goons. The flunkies were all laughing as they thought they had an easy victory. However, little did they know, some of Sahil's memories had returned when he saw the fake geode stones. He pulled out a weapon that resembled the shape of a hockey stick, which felt very natural to him. He took off his glasses and told his opponents that he would only need 2 minutes to beat them all. After escaping the underpass area in Nadir, the Shadow Courier was walking towards her hideout, which was located just outside the boundaries of the polluted wilds. When she arrived at the entrance, she called for the scaredy cat to get out of the hideout. She held out a piece of candy to entice the creature, but suddenly she heard a noise. 2 of the henchmen snuck up on the Shadow Courier and pinned her down. As she struggled to break free, the Kingpin stood in front of her. He demanded for the geode stones and would spare her life if she gave them, but she called him daft as she never had any to begin with. He was not pleased with her answer. Now that he found out the Shadow Courier lied, he wanted retribution. He was ready to unleash his full wrath on the girl, but a bolt of lightning struck his 2 lackeys that were holding down the rogue. The Kingpin looked back and was shocked to see the Gatekeeper this far out of Nadir. He reached for his brass knuckles and secured them on his hands. He was ready to make contact against the Gatekeeper, but Jacob sidestepped the attack and then used the shaft of his spear to trip the Kingpin. He ignored the big man lying on the floor and went straight to the little con artist. The little thief was known as Kira, and she tried to pretend she was an innocent girl. Jacob was not falling for her act as he asked for the geode stones. Again, Kira explained that she didn't have any, but Jacob was losing his patience. As he was about to drag her away, the Kingpin was now standing with 2 of his lackeys. Seeing how weak the boss was, Jacob was giving him one last chance to flee. However, the man pulled out a vial with a mysterious liquid inside. Kira couldn't have cared less, but when Jacob saw it, some memories appeared in his mind. It was telling him the mixtures contained essence from the geode stones. The leader began administering the vial to his 2 underlings, and their bodies began to transform. Standing before Jacob and Kira were 2 mindless Geode-mutants. Jacob tried to warn Kira about the mutants, but she ran circles around the creatures while wrapping them up with her strands of tape. With the mutant unable to move, she threw a punch right at the lower abdomen, but it had no effect. The mutants used their claw to cut free of the tape, and they now had their sights set on Kira. Luckily, Jacob jumped in and drove his spear into the creature's shoulder. He then kicked Kira out of the way and pulled his weapon out, before separating from the mutant. The Kingpin was enjoying the sight and he continued to order his minions to attack, but they stopped listening to him. One of the Geode-mutant grabbed and held him with his feet off the ground. The man who was once the superior was now begging for his mutated underling to let him go. The creature complied by throwing his former master hard against a tree, and he lost all movement throughout his body. Seeing how strong the mutants were, Jacob planned to flee, but Kira would not, as she still had a friend inside the cave. Jacob was unamused, but he decided to help distract the Geode-mutants while Kira saves her kitty cat. Jacob charged toward the 2 Geode-mutants. He went straight for his signature lightning strike that chained against both his targets. They were electrocuted, but somehow after only a few seconds, they were able to move again. Seeing that his lightning strike had little effect, he went for a melee attack. His spear made contact with one of his enemies, but when he tried to retrieve his weapon, the mutant grabbed hold. The other one tackled him and then sent him to the ground. Jacob was now unarmed, but suddenly, something hit the side of the Geode-mutant's head. Rocks were flying at bullet speed towards the Geode-mutants. When Jacob turned to where the projectiles were coming from, he saw Sahil launching the rocks like a puck with a hockey stick. the Geode-mutants had to cover themselves as Sahil continued his barrage. That created enough of a distraction for Jacob to grab his spear and charge up for one final attack. He gathered all the energy he had and channeled it into his spear. His weapon burst with lightning energy and he directed it towards the Geode-mutants. After waiting for the smoke to clear, the two mutants were somehow still standing. To make matters worse, a horde began to appear from the forest and surround them. Suddenly, they heard a noise from the cave. Pouncing out of the cave was Leo, the crystallized lion. It knocked away 3 Geode-mutants before unleashing a deafening roar. The creatures turned around and walked away from Jacob, Kira, and Sahil. Leo turned around and had his sights set to attack Jacob and Sahil, but Kira held him back. She was telling him that they were her allies, and that put both Jacob and Sahil at rest. However, that would not last as they heard footsteps approaching from the forest. They were all vigilant, thinking more Geode-mutants were on their way, but out of the forest, it was only one person who showed up. It was Devon,